Welcome to the Marvy Woods Football Academy podcast. In this season, I'm going to be speaking to academy managers from the Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, and some Scottish clubs. As an academy parent myself, I want to bring some insight into how these academies are being run. I find that it's easy to approach coaches. I hear from players, ex-players, and parents on many platforms about their experiences in academies. But I do not hear from academy managers. This is why I want to do this season. If you think first team managers have playing staff of 18 to 25, whereas academy managers have a playing staff of over 100. That could be from the under 9s to the under 18s. These are people who are so powerful, but they just seem like these men in grey suits or women in grey suits that you just never get to hear from. So what I want to do is I want to bring to you, the listener, what they think, what they want to sign, and what they are looking for in these academies. So if you like this episode, don't just watch and keep it to yourself. Subscribe to see more and spread the word. Welcome to another episode of the Marvy Woods Football Academy podcast. I am joined today by a guest that I've been looking forward to speaking to, QPR Academy Manager, Mr. Alex Carroll. Thank you for joining me, Alex.
That's a pleasure. A nice intro to have. I might have to try and record these more often, but no, it's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you today.
I appreciate you taking your time out. What I want to do is go back before we warm into the juicy stuff. Did you ever play football as a kid?
Played a lot of football as a kid. I just didn't play it very well. And I know a lot of people in the industry are very modest and say I wasn't good enough and I didn't quite make the grade, but I was a long way from the grade.
You didn't even go to the school.
No, exactly. I didn't even attend the school. I played school football and that was it. Played all the time with my friends, loved it, absolutely loved playing, but I just did it for enjoyment, never at a serious level. I grew up with some of my mates who were very good and were at academies and things like that. But yeah, unfortunately, that was never going to be my dream.
So what made you branch into the whole academy arena?
Yeah, so one of my friends was at Spurs and he was a scholar there. And so my routing's been a bit interesting and it's kind of one of those sliding doors moments. So he was a scholar there and he'd been speaking to their academy manager, head of education. They were saying they needed local families to help support some of the boys that were on scholarships there but needed somewhere to stay. So we became a host family.
Oh.
And from that, I then had some conversations and built up some relationships with the senior staff in the academy there and was lucky enough to get invited in for a coffee with John McDermott and just remember being absolutely petrified as an 18-year-old going into Tottenham's training ground. That was my way in. I built up a good relationship with John and thankfully he gave me an opportunity to do some administration in the academy. And then thankfully I'm here, I think, what is that now, sort of 16, 17 years later.
Oh, wow. Did you have to do coaching badges?
No, my routing has always been through sort of operations, really. I did do my level 2 when I first got to QPR. Did that under Chris Ramsey's guidance. Chris is a big mentor of mine, so I guess any opportunity to try and learn from him was one I wanted to take. But I also wanted to understand what the challenges on the ground were for the coaching staff. It was never going to be my calling in life. If I'm being brutally honest, I didn't enjoy it very much, but I did a little bit of coaching in the development centre just to understand a bit more and hopefully broaden my knowledge and understanding of challenges for coaches, understand players and young people a little bit better, but knowing that I was hopefully going to affect the game in a different way.
Okay. So what category is QPR?
Category 2 academy, yeah. We have been for over a decade now.
Oh, wow. And what makes you that category? How do you become a category 2 academy? For those who don't know.
There's an audit process, so you have to apply to become a certain category. There are 4 different categories and there's requirements for each of those. So when we look at kind of, I guess, our operational plan and what our resources are, the Cat 2 model kind of works for us at the moment. I think we would all strive and have aspirations here to be category 1 in the future, but we feel like we're operating with a high level category 2 environment. And I think probably the biggest thing for me is that we feel like we have people that can compete with category one staff. We think we've got top people here that are developers at heart and can really help young people try and reach their aspirations and their potential. So whilst we don't necessarily have the big Cat 1 badge like some others do, we've got amazing facilities now that rival Premier League teams, and I think we've got some amazing people to support that.
Yeah, your training ground. I've been twice this season with my boy. He was playing for Colchester, and your training ground's amazing. You can see that you guys have built a very nice complex there.
Yeah, we're really proud of it. We've been in for nearly 2 years now. The biggest thing for us was the opportunity to bring everyone under one roof. And, you go to some training grounds and they're incredible. But sometimes I think there can be a disconnect between first team and academy. It might literally be different buildings. It might be that there's division within one massive building. But here we've literally got a rectangle. It's pretty open. We were very deliberate in creating integrated spaces for particularly the first team and our under 21s on the boys' side to mix. And it's worked really well, and it's facilitated some really good relationships, whether that's players, that's staff, or a mix of both. We're really pleased with it. And we're looking forward to phase 2. We've delivered the building. We've delivered really high-level grass pitches. So we've got 5 Deso pitches, but the next stage then is our artificial surfaces for the younger one, which are on the horizon.
Right. So do you believe that the ground helps performances, or it helps the boys to perform better in some way?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think the biggest improvement has been the pitches. So I mentioned they're sort of Deso, which are, for anyone who's maybe not au fait with what that means, but they're hybrid pitches. So they're a mix of artificial stitched in alongside some seeded grass. And that's what you'd find at most Premier League stadiums, or probably all of them, to be honest, and Wembley, etc. So it enables us to train to play a certain way. So when we were building this training ground, when we spoke to the owners, we said, look, please, if you're going to cut costs in any area, please don't allow it to be the pitches. And they completely backed it. And it was something that Les Ferdinand and Chris Ramsey were really keen on pushing. And thankfully, the owners listened. And we've now got, as I said, 5 top level pitches that our men's team, our women's first team, as well as our senior academy teams play and train on every week.
So you got good backing from your owners then, which is good to hear.
Yeah, definitely. We're really lucky that we've got owners that genuinely have an interest in youth development. I've spent a lot of time with one of our owners in the last week or so, and every academy game that I've been at, he's been there. And
Wow.
He doesn't sort of pre-warn. He's just there because he wants to be there, and he brings his family, and it means a lot. And we're grateful to be in the Premier League Cup final next Thursday night at Loftus Road against Brentford. And he was chasing me around the date because he said, if I have to move my flight to go off to the States, I'm going to move it. So, yeah, there's real interest from not just that particular shareholder, but all of our shareholders, and very, very lucky to have that commitment.
Very blessed. Very blessed.
For sure.
So with the auditing, do you feel that restricts you, because there's certain rules and stuff that you have to abide by? And if you have a vision for moving the club forward in some kind of way, do you feel restricted by the audits? And if the audits wasn't there, what would you do differently that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're, as a Cat 2 where we're at the moment, and working closely with the audit kind of company, and then also our support manager from EFL, who comes out and sees us pretty regularly to keep us on track, there isn't anything that hamstrings us in any way or enables us not to do something. I feel like we are proud of our program, and we push in certain areas as well, that if, as an example, we feel the number of hours that we deliver on our training schedule each week for each age group works for us, and we can justify it through some evidence of what has worked in the past, then there's definitely an openness to have that kind of conversation. So I don't feel as though there's anything that we're particularly denied the ability to deliver. I guess the one thing that's a really interesting topic that I was speaking to someone about from the FA in the last 48 hours was, what age do you start in an academy? Because that's something that has probably been adjusted a little bit elsewhere. If you look at Germany's model now with Bayern Munich, who start under 11s, that's an interesting debate. When is kind of too early? But you counteract the kind of allowing children to express themselves and be kids. But then when you look at the data, actually the most productive age group to start in the academy journey, believe it or not, in the category ones, is the under 9s. So it's a really interesting dilemma.
And why is that?
I think it shows that if you've got that technical education from the very earliest part of the foundation phase, that gives you the best chance of progressing through those structures. Is a great example. Had under nines, there's a batch of those under nines have done incredibly well, gone through the whole structure there. 4 or 5 of them have played in the England national team, spent their whole lives at Chelsea. So that's an interesting debate, but one that there isn't freedom to explore at the moment within the rules.
But another side of that debate, sticking with that, is yes, technically it might be good for under nines, but also, how do you feel in terms of as soon as you sign, there's a price on your head, right? Business wise. So is it too young to have under nines that are signed to a contract where you can't leave because there's a fee attached to this signing? That's another devil's advocate part of it.
Yeah, it is. I don't think anyone feels particularly comfortable talking about fees and children of that age, to be honest. But as you've mentioned, it is part of the structure. There is movement between academies in the foundation phase and right the way through. I think, that you always hope that your best players will remain in your environment for as long as possible. Right. From I guess, that kind of altruistic wanting to share that experience with them and help them make the gap and reach their potential. But also, as you mentioned, and this will be where ownership will see it as well, is there is a lot of money spent on academy. It's not just a passion project. There are very, very smart and educated people at the top of these organisations that want to understand, if we're going to spend all this money on this structure, which is multi-million pounds in a lot of them, we need to know what the protection element is, because we can't just be developing for other people. So it's an uncomfortable topic, but one that we know is kind of part and parcel now.
What for you is youth development? What does that mean to you?
For me, it's helping young people. When you say youth development, obviously the word football's not in there or the word technical's not in there. So it can mean so many different things. And if I look at, I've been so lucky. I've been here for 11 years now. And I spoke to one of the boys that left us. I think he would probably have been 19 at the time, and he's now 22. And I spoke to him on the phone 3 days ago, and he was speaking to me about having just had a son a month ago. And our conversation was just not about football.
Right.
It was just about fatherhood.
Right.
And for me, that's youth development. We're really proud of the young man that he's developed into. Dealt with some disappointment of not, unfortunately, getting his extension here and making his way through to the first team. But he's gone on and he's made his senior professional debut. But I think most importantly, as I just mentioned, he's a father. And I look at the way that the staff here support the boys in their journeys. And some of the work they do is going to impact their entire lives in and outside of the game. So for me, youth development is so much broader. It's about guiding young people to reach their potential in whatever area that is in their lives. It could be social, it could be a career in something outside of the game, or it could be playing in the Premier League.
In that case, is results or youth development important?
I'm definitely on the side of youth development. In an academy structure, it's important that we develop winning mentality within the boys, because ultimately when they get to professional level, and to be honest, even at the kind of that transition period in the sort of under 21s to first team, be going out on loan, and trust me, they'll know about the difference between winning and losing when they go into the non-league dressing room. So it's important that we ingrain that and we find techniques to stretch in those areas, which we would do through things like internal leagues here, where we put a competition element into training. What we cannot do, though, is abandon our principles at the younger age groups to try to win games. Everyone wants to win. No one wants to lose. But ultimately, my job and the job of everyone within this building is to deliver players that are ready for the first team. And sometimes there's an obvious risk of abandoning principles that might expose those players in their right moment to try and win games of football. I think what we've done here this year has been even more aggressive in stretching players across different age groups and finding loan opportunities at earlier stages than we have done historically. What that has done is it's weakened our teams. So our under-18s and our under-21s haven't had good seasons in the league, but we've just had an 18-year-old play 2 championship games at the end of the season. He spent 12 weeks of his season as a second-year scholar on loan in Step 3. Now, taking him out of the youth team made the youth team weaker, but giving him the opportunity in non-league has made his pathway stronger. He was with our first team group for the final 3 weeks of the season, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the building would trade that for making sure that the under 18s win on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. That's a success story. Have you seen boys actually go out on loan and it had a more negative effect on who they are or their performance? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, we have. We have it every season. So not all loans work out. So we've had some examples this season where it's not quite worked out. And what's been beneficial, though, is kind of that feedback channel with the loan clubs and understanding exactly why it may not be working out so that we can reinforce that messaging when we speak to the boys. Some of the boys have been out this season, one or two in cases. Where there's one boy was particularly unlucky because we had a really positive conversation with a head coach at a non-league team about him. Was going into the team on that Saturday. I think he went out on the Tuesday or the Wednesday on loan. Management team changed that week at the non-league club, and immediately the new person came in and just was really honest and said he's not going to play for me.
Oh, wow.
So real shame, but the young lad couldn't help that. There's other cases where we did think there was going to be more of an opportunity, but through training and through small kind of exposure in games, it was felt that probably that player didn't offer the head coach exactly what he wanted. But that experience would undoubtedly benefit that young boy because he's gone up and down the country at times, not gone on the pitch. He's seen wins, losses, been in the dressing room, he's learned. And so undoubtedly it will help him on his journey. But if you looked at it as a black and white, he's been out, he was eligible for X number of games, but he's only played in whatever percentage it would have been. On the face of it, it doesn't look like a great loan, but socially and from a character building perspective, it would have been really good for him.
You're building such a great complex, and then you get a young kid leaving such great conditions and then go into another club, let's say a lower division down. Do you think the adaptability kind of has an effect in terms of if it's not such a good loan, like just the conditioning is like, whoa, like this isn't what I'm used to kind of thing?
Massively. One of the things that we speak about here now is almost preparing the young boys to be dropped. Because if you're you're an A grade or a gold medalist player in the academy structure, you're probably going to play consistently through schoolboy age groups. You'll be in the youth team, play every week in the 21s. All of a sudden, you've got to go and fight a little bit more. So that's another interesting dilemma. And I think one where, now we've tried to add a bit more of an element of competition in the top end of our academy structure. You'll know as a parent in the schoolboy structures, there's quite an equal share of things. And I think, the boys can become quite conditioned to that. It's then quite a shock when you get to a more competitive element and all of a sudden there's no guarantees. I think it's incumbent on us as youth developers to prepare them for that rather than
them finding out.
Drop them into the deep, expect the positive reaction. I think it's healthy for us to leave top performers out at certain times so they can understand what it's like to not play, understand what it's like to try and affect the game from being on the bench. How do they affect it in different ways? And so I think that's something that we have to carefully consider as we sort of plan out our pathway plans and sort of blocks of 6-week work here.
What do you think of showcase teams?
In terms of the boys who are looking to get into
or just like showcase academies that come to play you, the showcase managers who have the eye to spot these talents, like what do you think of those guys?
I think there's some unbelievable work that goes on in them because I've been grateful to have seen some of their showcase teams myself this year. Our recruitment guys here have got very strong links with the guys that run them because the level of quality is very high. One of my very good friends who I used to work with at QPR spent a long time at Kinetic as an example. And their structure there, I mean, they have been so productive over the years in providing boys that have been in schoolboy structures come back out, spent some time in a full-time program there and then gone and bounced back in. And that's just one example. Maybe showcase isn't the right description for those guys there, but there's many different setups that come in that play us regularly. I always find the competitiveness of the boys is high as well. So not just the quality, but that desire to impress is really good. So I think they do great work. And, when you look on social media, you see frequently the work's being rewarded because you're seeing representation from the showcase at the signings when the boys are getting their scholarships and their pro contracts. So yeah, it's definitely an area that is productive and we're really keen to continue to build those links.
It's always interesting to me from the outside as a Alex Carroll seeing that. I'm like, why is he there? Like, do you not think pinch him for my stuff? They got such an eye for talent, some of these guys,
Mm.
where I just think, obviously I know it benefits them to do what they're doing. But if I was sitting in your seat, it's easier said than done politically. I
Yeah.
would be like, mate, come over. you, you've got an eye. We need more of that over here.
We've got staff here that work within our recruitment structure that have had a good level of exposure of work within those kind of showcase environments. And you can see it, there's a number of clubs at the moment who are recruiting people that have got that background. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things that really impresses me as well, I mean, I had a conversation here with someone who'd set up his own academy in North London within the last 2 years, is the desire to help, and the amount of hours and unsociable hours that are being put in is remarkable. And really, like, probably not for the most significant financial gain either. It is purpose. It's to try and help young people reach their dream. And so the dedication level is enormous. And I think you're right to point out that clubs are identifying those individuals as being people that can add massive value.
Do you do academy tours at QPR?
Yeah, we do. We're trying to grow that year on year at the moment, actually. So we've this year probably taken away more groups than we have done, certainly in the last 6 or 7. Obviously, COVID had a bit of an impact on that, a bit of a stop-start nature of getting back out. But yeah, we've taken teams out to Denmark, to Belgium, Holland of late. We also host international tournaments at our training ground. So we've got a partnership with an organisation called Orange Veins. So that enables us to go away and take part in their official tournaments, as well as us hosting their official ones in London. So yeah, it's a big part of our programme. We want it to grow more. We don't quite have the budget of some of the bigger clubs in the area who can go to incredible places. And to go back to your point around that question of what is youth development, I mean, the social benefits that the boys would get.
That's
and the
what I was
culture.
going to ask you next. What's the benefits do you feel from tours?
Well, it's deeper, right? I mean, this pre-season, I was lucky to go to Finland with our under-18s and our under-21s. And one of the boys who was a first-year scholar was sitting, I only went for 48 hours, and I was walking around the complex on day one, and I saw one of the boys sitting on his own. So I just went over and just sat down next to him and just had a chat. So I initially thought something could be wrong. So I wanted to make sure he was okay. And I just said, like, what's up? And he just said, like, pretty much I'm taking it all in. So I was like, okay, talk to me a bit more about what you mean by that. And he said, well, it's the first time I've been on a plane.
Wow.
It's the first time I've been in water. But he was like, this is just so new to me. And what was incredible was he just threw himself into absolutely everything, really uncomfortable, like, and especially around his peer group as well. He's a really big character, but around his peer group where people had a lot more exposure to some of these things, he just wanted to just absolutely squeeze everything out of it. It was just a massive reflection for me. It was like, I've been very fortunate in my life to have traveled a lot, and I take that for granted. So every chance we can to try to create those opportunities for the boys, we will do so.
Yeah, I think traveling is so beneficial for the mind, especially if you're just on a little neighborhood block and that's all you see all the time, and you take that person out, there's more. It just expands your mind. I'd never even thought of that. So it's good to know that that kind of impact is happening on a young player.
And I think actually what was an important moment for a lot of us in the academy system as well was during lockdowns, and understanding, like you just said, around maybe, the challenges that some of the boys face in their local environments. And, we're probably at the start of it wrongly assuming that they would have access to be able to, whether it's exercise, whether it's internet connection, whatever else it might have been, to kind of keep connected with us during that period. It wasn't easy for some of the boys, and many siblings in one house, and it just, opportunities to create, to coin what is quite a cliche Premier League phrase, these life enriching experiences that if you weren't part of the academy system, it's unlikely that the boys would get them at their ages. So yeah, we have to always reflect upon that and realise that the impact of the experiences are far deeper than helping them on their football journey.
Do you decide the final outcome of a try list?
So we have a range of people across departments that would feed in. So there would be representation from coaching, performance and recruitment generally at the younger age groups, and then as they move through, then there may be more people involved in that process as well. I would be part of the process, but it wouldn't be me having a single vote. For sure, it is a number of people that feed into it.
Is there a specific profile that you guys go for at QPR?
So we've got positional profiles. They're very simple at the younger age groups, obviously, because positions change. We don't quite know where the young boys are going to end up physically. That may change their position on the pitch, etc. So we do have quite loose positional profiles at younger age groups. They're very specific then towards the top end in an attempt to try to create as much alignment with our first team as possible. But yeah, they evolve in depth as you go from sort of under nines right the way through to under 21s.
What have you seen, or you and your coaches, is the difference between grassroots and an academy player? A grassroots player and an academy player. What is the difference there?
I think for me, it's too simple to create a stereotype of one or the other,
Right.
to be honest. We had a talent ID event here for our under 15s, and those players there had a real mix of backgrounds. Some of them had been in academies, had come out, some had never been in academy, some had done loads of one-on-one coaching with people, some had done none. And the range of abilities, skill sets, creativity, decision-making capacity that you saw on the pitch, it would have been difficult to say, oh, that one's had 5 years in the academy, that one hasn't. You know, some will come in from grassroots here on trial, and you'll be at week one and everyone will be going, we have to take this boy. But he's never been in the academy before. But sometimes that's a great benefit because maybe they haven't been so conditioned
Yeah.
to be a certain way.
Yeah.
But equally then, we're, you know, at the moment, I've been speaking to another club who have been very supportive in an under 12 player that unfortunately hasn't been offered an extension at his current club, but they're helping from a player care perspective to support him on his next part of his journey. And his technical education he's had at his current club is his standout quality. He may not have got that in another setup. So I'm a believer in it's too simplistic to go, you'll tell a grassroots and an academy player. I think it's so individual.
Okay. How do you deal with parents who have an issue with their son playing out of position? You have that at QPR, and how you guys deal with it?
There's so much emotion attached to that journey, right? That there's always going to be some difficult conversations at times. I think the first thing is that you have to be really honest and you have to share what your program is and why you believe in certain methods. And if that is experimentation of boys moving around different positions, then you have to make sure the parents understand why you're doing that, because I'm a parent of two young boys and I would want to know. I mean, I know I've got this background in the system, but if that's in education, if it's in anything else, I'd want to understand why things are being done a certain way. So when I go around a tour of primary schools, you want to understand exactly why it is that they're going to teach a certain method, right? And that should be no different in academy football. So I think it's firstly, the education piece is really important. I think it's then really important that there's an openness to having conversations as well, that you don't allow things to build up and then you wait until the next face-to-face player parent staff review when there's been some frustration and it's continued for too long a period, and then it becomes a more challenging conversation than maybe it needed to be. I think there needs to be an openness to allow parents to ask, and hopefully, I mean, of course I can't speak for the parents, you know, I'm sure there are some frustrations here like there will be at all academies, but we have definitely tried to make sure that parents know that they can ask questions, but that we have got a methodology here, and it's probably not specifically just unique to QPR at the younger age groups, because there's going to be, I think, such a variety in the experience of playing in different areas of the pitch. But it is what we do, and if it's not what people want, then maybe we're not the right environment as well. So I think there has to be that understanding.
How many days a week do the boys train, like from the younger or the older age groups?
So the younger age groups would have 3 training sessions and a game a week, and then that would evolve through as you get more towards the full-time program, where there'd be a little bit more in terms of the contact hours. But generally sort of in the younger schoolboy structure, 3 sessions, whether that's 3 evenings and then the game on the Sunday, or 2 evenings and a Saturday morning and then the game on the Sunday.
Do you expect parents or players to be there like for like most of the time? You know, that commitment is a lot. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's massive, and certainly now as I've become a parent myself, I appreciate that challenge more, and I empathise a lot more for not only the parents but also the siblings of the boys that are in the structure, because I know how much sacrifice there is. But yes, there is a commitment. We would expect there to be full attendance. Of course, we understand there's going to be moments whereby it's not possible. There's going to be particular family events that we want the boys to go and be part of. There'll be things at school that, again, we don't want the boys to sacrifice. But yeah, we would want the commitment to understand that, yeah, we would want the full attendance across those sessions and the games each week. But working with the families to understand the particular moments in the calendar where it might be important that they're away for a particular reason. As an example, we wouldn't want a family to not go on holiday because they're worried about not being in the training structure for that week, and then they think they're going to not get selected for the next 3 weeks.
That's that there you've just said is a trialist's headache.
Yeah.
Like most trialists, if they're on the 8 week and they've booked a holiday before, it's like,
Yeah.
how do we go and tell these guys that we're going away?
Yeah. No, but again, we just want to have that open communication, but we would never, I'd be really disappointed if a family felt as though we were ever holding them back from going on holiday, as an example. That would be a real shame. But it's like we do with staff here. I think there's always been a very traditional football season, and there's almost that kind of unwritten rule of, you just go away in that 4 or 5 week break in the summer. But here we're of the mindset where if you want to take a week off in the season and you want to go away with your family and it suits your structure, absolutely. Let's just make sure we get the work covered and the boys don't suffer as a result of you not being there. But it's really important that, like you said at the very start of this conversation before we started recording, unfortunately tomorrow's not promised. So those life experiences have to be taken and exploited at every chance you can get.
What's your take on players who are regularly late?
You have to understand why first, because there's been many occasions here where people might jump to a conclusion and make an assumption. And then when you do some digging and understand the challenges that that young boy and that family might face, that there's more to it. And are there ways in which we can help support?
Right.
So when you said that, my immediate reaction is they need help.
Okay.
There's a problem. They're going to need some help. And we need to work together with the family to understand what that looks like, because that can be really delicate as well. Really, really delicate. So one of the things that we speak about here, and funny enough, actually, I mean, John McDermott was speaking about this in an event that I was at last week, is that ability for us all as academy staff to understand ourselves and the relationships that we have, whether that's with the boys or the families. And it might be that a family and a few boys don't feel comfortable talking to me. I might not have that engagement with them, but the player care coordinator might have them and they might chat to him freely. So it might be that I have to say to him, we need to understand a little bit more about why this is happening, why this is repeating. We track it. We always make sure that we're keeping a note of who's late. And if a pattern emerges, then we look around and go, right, who do the family trust? And let's try and explore it through those conversations. But yeah, when you mentioned it, that gut feel for me is like, yeah, there's an issue here. We need to try and find a way to help.
What is it that you look for in a scholar that an academy player lacks? So what is that thing? Because there's only few boys who will get picked to go into being a scholar. So what is that thing that you look for in a scholar that you might not have as an academy player?
I think when we sign scholars, they're signed for different reasons. So it's a larger group for us next year. And we've got a range of boys that have come through sort of our internal age groups. But then we've also signed some players that have come from other clubs that unfortunately haven't been given an opportunity there. And in one case, in fact, in two cases, boys have come from outside of the academy structure and have come from either like a youth team of a non-league club or a grassroots or a showcase structure as well. So all very different backgrounds. And if I look at that group, they are signed for different reasons. Now, there are, I guess, those QPR standards that we want them to uphold at all times, that we want to be evident across all of them. We've got three, which are respect, responsibility, and resilience. And we want all of our players to have an understanding of what it means to put on the hoops every time they play and to conduct themselves in our environment here, because they represent the academy. Wherever they go, they're a representation of us. whether that's when they bump into the CEO in the corridor, or whether that's when they're on tour in Spain and they're in the airport and meeting the general public. So when they've got the badge on, we want them to understand that. So there's some traits that we want to be shared, but we don't want to suppress their individualism as well. So that might be very different. I think about one particular player that we've taken from another club. The thing that struck me during his trial was his leadership. And he's come from real disappointment. He'd been at his club for a long time, from pre-academy all the way through. But I saw the way he engaged with staff in training. He asked questions at the end of the session, wanted to know what we thought his development plan would be. I spoke to him and his dad in a presentation around what we could offer. Really insightful questions coming back. And I just thought he could be a captain.
Love that.
So that's one example.
Mm.
But then I'm thinking in top of my head, I've got another example of a boy that came in and just had eye-catching 1v1 ability.
Right.
And that's his individual element on top of those sort of character traits. But I think we're definitely always trying to understand more about the boy's character as we welcome them to the full-time program. So we've developed really good links with some of the other academies in the country. And then if the players are coming out of there, we're getting a lot of insight from multiple people around their ability to learn, their desire, their work rate, how are they in the classroom, what are they like around the building. So we try and build up a big picture, but they're all being signed for different reasons.
So then, in you saying that, without obviously naming names, like, pick a player that got released and what was it that they lacked? So just so it's insightful for somebody who is at that stage, what is it that that player that you guys had a discussion, you said, he's got this, but what was that thing?
Yeah, so I mentioned the positional profiles earlier.
Mhm.
So we would have them for our transition into full-time football. So our full-time squads, our 18s and our under 21s, the positional profiles for us are the same as the first team. Now, obviously, we're not expecting someone to be able to execute everything in there to the level of a first team player, but there'll be something on that profile that they'll be lacking in, right? And that'll be the reason why we don't think it's the right fit for them, for QPR for right now. Doesn't mean to say, and this is, those conversations are undoubtedly the worst part of the job, to sit with the parents and the boys, particularly under 16 level, actually. I find that they're really, really difficult. And to explain that the timing isn't quite right, there is something that's missing, which is why we've decided that we don't think the fit to be full-time in our program works. But it might be that that's not what someone else is worried about in another environment. We do this, like I mentioned, the relationships that we've built there with clubs to try and support transition into our program. We obviously try and do the same for the others. And, there was I can think of particular players that are currently looking for other opportunities at other clubs who didn't quite get something here. And again, their appreciation of exactly what that young player can bring meant that they were okay to maybe look past something that we felt was going to be the difference between a yes or no here. And they've gone on, and, there's a one particular boy that has gone on to sign for another club, and that club were just so thrilled that the strengths that he brought in his position were exactly what they were looking for.
Right.
So when we had that conversation with that club before the player went out on trial, we knew it was a really good fit, and we pushed and said, look, we think there'll be interest, but we really strongly believe this will be an option where he's got a real chance of getting a yes. And thankfully that one worked out. And, we're actively now trying to help the boys who are still trying to make that transition out elsewhere. But to go back, I know it's a fairly long-winded answer, there'll be something in that positional profile, whether that's a physical trait. So if it's a wide player and we feel as though maybe they don't have pace and that explosiveness that we would demand to work towards at first team level here, that might be a reason, or it could be an area of their technical level that we feel doesn't quite marry up with what we would be looking for in their position.
Right. So do you look at school reports, as you was talking about, like behaviors and stuff? Do you liaise with the schools and watch reports to make sure that the boy is representing QPR in those environments?
Yeah, definitely. And there's moments where we would want to work with the school as well to come together to try to change a behaviour and change an outcome. So there's a brilliant example of the work that our education manager did alongside some teachers at school, one of our under-16s. So talented boy, probably wasn't behaving in the best way at school and wasn't getting the grades that he should have been. So part of our school release program, and that as always should be seen as a real positive opportunity to come into our building full time and live the life of a scholar one day a week. And he wasn't sticking to his deadlines and wasn't necessarily behaving in the way that we knew that he could behave in. He's a good boy, but was just getting himself into some issues that he didn't need to. And ultimately, we worked alongside the school to say, if this continues, this is not going to work well for us, and your opportunities are going to be limited. And reflect on the conversations that we've then had with his mum since, which have been like, that has helped significantly. And he was, I know, because I spoke to our education manager recently about it again, he was up till the early hours of the morning on a weekend getting his deadlines sorted because he knew that school release wasn't going to be an option for him if he didn't. And so we worked together, right? And that's how it should be. And regular contact is made to try to make sure that we understand where the boys are. And of course, there's going to be varying levels of kind of attainment, but it's the ability to try your best and to make sure you turn up, and the non-negotiables really that we would demand here when they're full time, that we want to support the schools to make sure they're doing that in their education settings when they're schoolboys as well.
Yeah, because I feel that some boys don't necessarily know the connection. Like I'm talented. Like, I don't need this, but it's like I'm trying to make sure that people know there is an actual connection with the schools and clubs that are actually monitoring their behaviors, and it might go against them in the future.
And I think there's a little bit of a danger of this idea of a 24/7 pro that is kind of published so widely on social media, and everything is geared towards performance on the pitch, right? Like you just mentioned, there is definitely a positive correlation between those boys that organize themselves to attack every aspect of their development in the classroom, in the gym, in analysis, on the pitch, right? Those habits crop up everywhere. And we're very big on trying to push the boys when they come in full time here. If their grades are of a certain level, we want the boys to try and explore A levels alongside their football. Now, I know that's not something which is promoted in every environment, but we believe that there's, as I mentioned, a correlation there between applying yourself really well in the classroom as well as then on the pitch. And I can actually remember a conversation with a parent who said, I'm worried about him signing up for this A level because I think it's going to impact him and his ability to compete. And I said, I see it the opposite way, because I know obviously I don't know the boy as well as his father does, but from my experiences of working alongside him, he's incredibly diligent and will be a self-starter and drive his own program to some extent and turn up all the time and put absolute effort into everything that he does. So really important for us that we push in all aspects, because I'm a big believer in habits.
Seems like the common theme. How do you find, as you said, going back, release and retain meetings? How do you feel emotionally around that period of time?
I don't think there's any way to dress them up. They are really tough. Of course, they're the most challenging for the boys, but they're hard for everyone around the room. And it's a really difficult moment in the calendar across all age groups, whether that's sitting in with the younger schoolboys or whether it's a young adult. Sometimes those ones at the very top end can be the most difficult when you've known someone for 11, 12 years and the journey's not going to continue. That's really tough. Some of those have been the most emotional, but I'd say particularly that kind of 16s decision period is really difficult, whether or not the scholarship's going to be offered.
Cool. Do you discuss with the manager what boys are doing well or who to look out for? How does that work at QPR?
Yeah, definitely. So we have pathway planning meetings here. So that would have a group of us that would contribute first team, so staff that have a foot in academy and first team camps, both on the technical and the physical side as well, because we've created some unique positions here, like the head of integrated performance, whose job it is to help bridge the physical gap between development football and first team football, as well as the traditional kind of technical support as well. So we would plan out periods of time, and we consistently create documents and lists of the players that we feel are, either ready to be judged as first team players if they're at that level, or considerations for maybe sort of drip feeding opportunities to train with the first team, with an understanding that they shouldn't yet be judged, but that we feel that there is definitely something long term there, and that those moments are going to benefit their kind of long term and potential. So we have formal meetings every sort of 4 to 6 weeks, but we're very fortunate in the layout of this training facility here that our under 21 staff literally sit outside the head coach's office. Very deliberate in terms of making sure that we're facilitating those opportunities to speak. And yeah, that's something that was central to the design of the facility here, as well as the pitches being side by side. Now, we can all talk about this very planned out kind of strategy, and we're going to drip feed and stuff, but sometimes those opportunities just come out of nowhere. That will be the same at every club. And I can think of an example during, I think it was in October half term here, where the first team of training, someone goes down injured, they need a defender. We had our 18s and our 16s training, and we actually felt as though one of our 16s deserved that opportunity based on his recent training and game. So he came across and spent the next 2 days with the first team. Now, that hadn't been thoroughly planned out for the previous 6 weeks, but it's a huge opportunity because we've designed a facility where they're training next door to each other. And then that puts him on the radar. So yeah, there's an element of planning and of course a lot of work and thought that goes into that. But there's of course those moments that you got to exploit as well.
Have you ever released a player that you thought it was a mistake? Like you made a mistake actually releasing that guy, like maybe we should have kept him on a bit longer?
First thing to say is that we've definitely all made mistakes. I've made mistakes in this, and I'm sure everyone has. There are players playing in the professional game that I've been in the room where we've said no. So you'd look at that and say, that's a mistake. Sometimes it is about timing. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, the last sort of 12 to 18 months has been a lot of change here in terms of expectations of positional profiles at the top end of our structure. They're a bit different to what they were 18 months ago. So that might not suit a player that was here previously. And then unfortunately, maybe it doesn't quite work in the way that we've changed how we play. Or it might be that we have, let's just say, 4 really talented right backs across our 18s and 21s. We just can't quite find a program for everyone. And there may not be space. And at that moment in time, you say no, someone down the road needs a right back, they flourish. There's no one ahead of them. Yeah. So they've got a clear pathway. Sometimes that's just how it goes. So the answer is yes. I've made mistakes. I look at some of the decisions, and then it's really important that we reflect upon why we've said no, and that we're content enough that it was the right decision at that moment. You look and see with absolute pride that people have gone on to do well. But yeah, you of course think, well, maybe we could have done things a little bit differently.
Right. Have you seen a talented boy throw it all away because of lack of discipline?
Yes.
What was that scenario like?
I've seen it on multiple occasions. I said this to the new scholars that are joining in June, July. We just had their induction event for the parents, and I said to the boys and to the parents, if they only took one thing from what I said to remember as they were heading away, was to remember that it's their journey, it's their individual journey, and not to think about what's happening to other players within that group, a group below, a group above. There's going to be reasons why we're structuring things a certain way for that player. Hopefully they see it's for the benefit long term. But I think where I've seen a pattern emerge is where players and also their families get too caught up in what's happening to others. And then that becomes the biggest distraction, and that affects their motivation, and they get disappointed.
Right. So
if a player within their group who they've come through with for X number of years gets a contract earlier than them, it becomes about the other player, and it's not about the development program for that particular boy. So that's probably the biggest pattern that I've seen emerge, which can negatively influence the success, really.
What distractions would you advise an academy player or a player coming through the ranks to avoid?
That would be one that I've just gone through in terms of thinking about others and comparing yourself all the time to other people. I think that can become really unhealthy. The one thing I try and flip to become more of a positive rather than to think about, we, of course, as all academies would, try to educate the boys around the threats maybe to their time and because of their status that, you know, people will unfortunately try and exploit them, target them for certain reasons. So, of course, try and educate there. But I'd like to try and almost think of it more on a positive and think about the positive distractions that they can have in their lives, they can fill their time with alongside their football. So we were talking, you know, this week around, you know, there's particular gaps in our schedule. What do we think about using that for language lessons as an example? Can we try and spark an interest in the players that they might then want to spend their spare time on? Or it might be, you know, it might not always be as kind of educational as such. It might be an interest in something that's more varied. Can we facilitate an opportunity for the boys to speak to the PFA and say, look, I've got all this spare time in my week. Are there ways in which I can explore that further? We've had boys that are into music like yourself, Marvy. What connections can we facilitate there? So I'd say it's like, yeah, trying to educate on pitfalls, but also the massive value in like exploring other things outside of football, because yeah, that 24/7 football pro that I was speaking about earlier can be dangerous.
Right. How valuable do you think diet is in football?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. I've definitely become more aware of that in recent years here, that that's an edge, right? And I think as a young player, when you're trying to make the transition through to become a first team player, you don't want there to be any excuses. And if that's lateness, if that's body composition, could be anything, right? But you don't want any of those to be held against you when people are sitting down and talking about whether or not you should be afforded an opportunity. You should be judged on the pitch and how you conduct yourself around the environment. All of the things that you can control, you got to control them, you know, and everyone's got different body types and things like that. And of course, you know, we've got a team of nutritionists and performance staff that work really closely to individualized programs here. But it's a really important part now of becoming an athlete, and the physical demands on the game are getting more and more intense. Distances that are getting covered in games is going up, high speed running is going up, and anything that you can do to make sure that you've got that physical capacity to repeat that over and over again
Mhm.
is really vital.
Do you think data is important in football?
I think it's important. Our CEO spoke about this with us when he first came in, that it's important for us to consider it as an opinion in the room, but not the opinion in the room.
Right.
So if you imagine having a group of 4 or 5 staff that have got decision making authority around something, then maybe data becomes the 5th or 6th person rather than becoming the casting vote.
Right.
It undoubtedly enables us to reflect upon the work we've delivered and look back at what maybe a successful pathway has looked like. What's the journey look like for an academy boy that's gone right the way through? So we can retrospectively look at the exposure that they've had through their time. We can look at mapping back from the demands of the first team game to look at whether, as an example, from a physical data perspective, the outcomes that we would expect a certain position to deliver in a first team, can we showcase our players to demonstrate that they can deliver that in a under 21s game as an example? So it enables us to be very thoughtful around how we program, helps us to recruit to be more aligned with our first team, definitely enables us to save time. So we create efficiencies in our decision making as well. But you can't lose sight of that human connection, that human eye, still massive value.
Do you see similarities in the mindsets of the boys going to become a scholar or a pro compared to the boys who are not?
I think definitely as you get towards the top end and then our kind of assessment of whether or not we're going to extend, there'll definitely be some similarities in terms of that drive to want to be a footballer. I know that sounds really simple, but we say to the boys all the time that without trying to sound too much, too sort of Orwellian in this, but they're being watched at all times.
Mm.
So their application, they're turning up for training at the right time. They're driving their own individual programs when they're given the ability to do so. That's judged all the time. And, when they are consistently demonstrating those behaviors, again, sorry, a bit of a buzzword, but almost like those high performance behaviors, if you like, they're self-motivated. I think that gives us the confidence to go then to the first team head coach or the head of methodology or whoever it might be and say, look, this player is consistently demonstrating these behaviors. We trust that when they go into the first team space, they're not going to let anyone down. We speak to the boys again about trust being a huge word. You might be a bag of tricks as a wide player, but if first team head coaches don't trust you to track back and get into shape quickly, you're not coming back. If training breaks down on you because you turned up the simple pass, you tried something in the wrong area, counter-attack, they score, you might not come back. So that sort of self-drive and motivation, I would say, is a similarity.
In your development centres, do you have a certain quota of boys that you take into your academy yearly?
No, there's nothing set. I'm not sure I'm a believer in that because I think then things become a little bit forced and false. But we've had some boys consistently over the years that have made the way through development centres into our academy and then have gone on to be in the first team structure as well. So it fluctuates, but it's a healthy number each year. And this year's no different. And I can think of a particular boy in our youth development phase that is massively excelling now, spent some good time in our development centre. And it's really important, though, that we try to mirror as closely as we can the kind of coaching methodology and approach in there so that when they do get the opportunity to come on trial, that they've got an understanding of the drills that we deliver and there's a bit more of that comfort because, as we all know, and you mentioned earlier, the trial process is scary. So as much as we can try and smoothen that a little bit from the development centre when they're coming in, we'll always try and do so.
Do you communicate with parents when they're on trial or leave it for the full 8 weeks?
It wouldn't be me specifically that would, but we're really keen that the identifying scout has a relationship whereby they are checking in. So we would have conversations at sort of midpoints as well of trials. But yeah, we want to make sure that the trialist parents feel that there is an open communication channel. I'm sure that people are apprehensive about asking questions because they'll be fearful. I think that's natural. But hopefully they feel as though the identifying scout is their sort of point of contact. And when they come in for day one, we have a member of the operations team that sits down and does like an induction with them and kind of, make sure they share key contacts, because also they might come in with a fresh perspective and they might identify something as trialist parents that we haven't seen, we haven't thought about. And it might be that we need to adapt something. So we want to make sure that they understand how they can anonymously report stuff and things like that as well.
So you, as an academy director, the playing staff you have on your roster is like over 100, I take it, from the under nines all the way up. What is it that people don't see that you do on a day-to-day basis that you feel, if they really knew the amounts of things that I'm pulling here, the visions, the structures that I have to put in place, what is it about your role you do that I wouldn't want to say underappreciated, but just to highlight what you do to the normal person? What does Alex Carroll, as the academy director, do at QPR?
Probably a huge amount of my time would be spent with staff particularly, and that would be stuff that's inside or outside of their job. So I think as an academy director or manager, you are always someone, hopefully, that people feel that they can knock on the door and have a conversation with to help solve a problem. It could be a work problem, but it could be a problem outside of it as well. So I would like to hope that as a person, people feel as though they can open up as much as possible to me. And I would say I pride myself on spending and making time for the staff here so that they know that they're supported. Obviously, you get a lot of people that maybe don't know so much about the academy system that say, talk to me about a typical week. It's so difficult. There's very little that happens every week that I know that I will deliver. But I might spend, in a day, I might spend collectively 3 or 4 hours sitting with staff individually to try to help with something. And it might be a problem that's cropped up, or it might be something's happened in their family, you know.
So the season's coming to an end and you've got next season coming. How do you plan? What's your vision football wise? How do you structure? Do you have things already that you're structuring to say, right, I need to make sure that program is there and this is that for the future? What does that look like?
So the first thing we do is wrap everything up. So we make sure we reflect on what's gone well, not so well in the season,
Mhm.
before we look at what we're going to try and achieve for next season. Then with the departments, sit down and talk about what we want to drive to achieve. So I had a really good 4 hours, I think it was, with a couple of our recruitment staff the other day. And we worked back from what we wanted to be renowned as and kind of then went into the real detail. And then think about the specifics. So if we go, we've got these, you probably got these kind of headlines that we need to agree upon in terms of our objectives that serve our vision. So our vision is to become the academy of choice in London. So everything serves towards that. We then plan our departmental targets. And then within that, we'll be a bit more specific around the role of staff within that. And then also sort of succession planning for players. So at the moment, a lot of our work is thinking about our 18s and our 21s groups, who might be identified for loan opportunities from pre-season onwards, who might get the chance to go on the first team plane on their trip, and then where the opportunities may lie for the younger players to sort of step into age groups above. So a lot around player succession planning at the moment. But yeah.
Do you enjoy it?
I really enjoy that part. That's a
You see the
strategy. I'm
passion in
quite,
your face.
strategy. I like strategy.
Right.
That's kind of been my upbringing, I would say. I really enjoy that part of it. And I really enjoy having the opportunity to be in the room and almost like in the right way, punch or support for young people or academy staff to get opportunities. I had a really good conversation with a room at the FA about that last week. And there were some people that have got that same passion as me as well.
That's good to hear. Last question, and it's 4 quick fire questions that I always do. What is the qualities you need to be a good academy player, academy coach, academy scout, and academy manager?
Wow. For each of those,
Yes.
right.
Yes, you're
Player
in
was
the
the
hot
first
seat,
one.
mate.
Player was the first
It
one.
was the first one.
Work hard.
Right.
What was the second one?
Coach.
Have empathy.
Okay. Scout.
Think outside the box. Be patient.
And academy manager.
Have an open door.
Woo! You've won first prize. Well done. Yeah, is there anything that I haven't covered that you would like to say?
No, I really enjoyed that. That covered everything. That was a brilliant conversation, and I could talk about development all day. So I really appreciate it, and your insights as well, because you're on that journey as an academy parent now as well. So
yes.
I appreciate the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me, Alex, and I hope you guys join me on the next episode. Take care. This episode is sponsored by the PV Consultant, the go-to business strategist for salon owners and solo beauty professionals who want to grow smarter, not harder. If you're ready to boost your visibility and start attracting more clients today, download the PV Consultant's free Google cheat sheet at www.thepvconsultant.net/cheat sheet. It's packed with simple, powerful tips to get your business seen by the right people. A big thank you to the PV Consultant for supporting today's episode and helping more businesses shine.